Hello, YouTube. I continuously collect information about Soviet ufology, most striking UFO cases and encounters, as well as USOs, of course. And it goes into modern times as well. Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and so forth. But today I want to bring you a very interesting testimony that goes back a few decades, meaning the events took place back in the early to mid-1980s. Mikhail Vasilyevich Golovachov, member of the Astrakhan branch of the Russian Geographical Society, head of the paleontology workshop, scientist and researcher, an author of a number of books and scientific articles, by the way. So he published his recollections about UFO sightings and encounters in the year 2025. Was that the information was published. And the title of his memoirs, so to say, is UFOs in Soviet Astrakhan, Just the Facts. In 1984, like many students at that time, after the first year of the Natural Geography faculty of the Astrakhan Pedagogical Institute, Mikhail joined the Soviet Army and, as he wanted to, he ended up in the Caucasus region to serve his army service duty. After sergeant training in the small Georgian town of Dusheti, he was assigned to the Nakhichevan Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic in the Mountain Alpine Battalion, which was based in Julfa. Julfa, Juga in the Armenian version, is such an interesting city, strangely divided into two parts by the state border. At one time, half the city was the USSR and half the city was in Iran. The border with Iran ran along a mountain river with the beautiful name of Arax, which actually divided the unfortunate city in half. So all the residents of the Soviet half of the city naturally had close relatives on the other side, over the hill, Zabugrom, Russian saying. No one resettled them in connection with the division of the territory. But that's not the point. When Mikhail and a few of his fellow soldiers joined this separate mountain alpine battalion, the old-timers immediately warned them bluntly, "Sometimes there are different things flying here. Everything is in the sky at night. Don't be alarmed. It is not dangerous. The main thing is not to try to shoot at them. You won't get it anyway, and even if you do, you won't hurt them, but you will suffer later. If you cannot account for the unauthorized usage of ammunition consumption, and you will scare the people in the city." And the city, according to Mikhail, began immediately behind the fence of the area and was separated from the fence only, fence of their unit, military unit, and was separated from the fence only by the station and railway tracks. They didn't explain to the soldiers what was flying there. You will see for yourself, or you won't if you're lucky. It's better not to see. It's a creepy sight, though not fatal. It became so interesting to the soldiers that they couldn't stand it, and having plucked up the courage, asked permission of the commanders. The battalion commander and the company commander did not shy away and honestly admitted, "Well, yes, it happens sometimes flying, but we don't know what it is. And it flies, as it turns out later, mainly in the late spring or early summer, that is, May or June." And so one warm May night in 1985, Mikhail stood guard at the observation tower in the military equipment park, Silence. There is still half an hour to an hour before the changing of the guard. The sky is clear. The Milky Way is in the palm of your hand. Reach out and touch it. And suddenly, out of the corner of his eyes, he felt a slight movement in the sky to his side. Mikhail turned his head towards the border. It's flying! His jaw dropped by itself in surprise, and his hands clutched at the weapon that he had. It's a good thing he didn't fall out of the tower. From the Tabriz Pass, right across the state border, a translucent cigar-shaped object was moving absolutely silently, at high altitude and at high velocity. The stars shone through it, and at the same time, the onboard lights and some kind of portholes were clearly visible on it. No wings, no tail, just a cigar. There was also no contrail, clouds of fire, smoke, or steam from behind, just moving fast and smoothly in the sky. The object flew almost over his head, and making a small detour, embarked to their so-called reserve area. Mikhail clearly saw it landing behind the hills on the far side of the shooting range. The battalion was alerted, and people sent to look for the intruder. Half an hour later, they were all suddenly taken off guard, and another company took their place out of turn. It turned out that their commissar, head of the guard, a young 2-year-old lieutenant, these are those who served as an officer for 2 years after graduation, could not withstand the psychological strain on a young, fragile body and began firing his pistol at the moving target. Naturally, it was no longer possible for him to serve that day, so they changed them. The second and the third companies who returned from the reserve area and were alerted were angry and reticent. As always, nobody and nothing, they said. The local shepherds confirmed that the cigar had settled as usual behind a large hill. They don't go there themselves. They are afraid. The most amazing thing is that even the grass was not crushed anywhere, but they did see the object. The next day, the special officer, referring to counterintelligence, особист in Russian, special term, from the division who arrived, as usual in such situations, interviewed all the eyewitnesses, as he himself put it. The situation was familiar and mundane to him, and it turns out the soldiers did not tell him anything new. The readings were all the same, down to the smallest detail, except for one touch, the altitude and the size of the object. Here opinions differed very much. To some, the cigar seemed 5 meters long and flew no higher than 15 meters, which is why the lieutenant started shooting at it. To others, it was 15 to 20 meters long at the altitude of 100 meters. In general, the takeoff was in length from 5 to 500 meters at a flight altitude from 15 to 1,500 meters. As it seemed to Mikhail personally, the object was flying at the altitude of at least 1 kilometer and was about 100 meters long. Of course, they were all scared by what had happened, and they didn't hesitate to tell to the особист, military counterintelligence, about it. But his parting phrase did not please Mikhail personally, and even made him very uneasy. You guys haven't seen the second moon rise yet. For some reason, no one asked the old-timers what he meant later, and neither did Mikhail. And why ask again if it's already clear that once you get here, you can get away with it? Mikhail didn't have to wait long. It happened in the early autumn of the same year. The weather was nice and warm. An inspector from the army headquarters arrived and announced the night shooting exercises. "Don't let us down, my sons," the commissars admonished them, having put together their unit formation before going to the shooting range. When they arrived at the place, that was like 1.5 kilometers on foot, it turned out that not only their battalion had been withdrawn, but also the entire regiment, along the anti-aircraft gunners and the company. Only the musicians who stood guard in their place remained in the unit. While everyone was lining up, while they were reading out the order for the upcoming exercises, while they were listening to the general's political information that the motherland believes in them and trusted them with weapons and they must be able to handle them, the fate of the Soviet state depends on their accuracy, etc., a hare jumped out in front of the formation. "He is so big and arrogant," he sat down, scratched behind his ear, and moved lazily towards the firing line. The general, he must have been an avid hunter, immediately had this hunting instinct. Whoever shoots this hare gets a general's watch, and he takes off the watch of his hand. Oh, he should not have said that. Such a barrage began. The horror of it. Everyone was shooting, even the officers. Naturally, no one got. Poor animal. It's a good thing it didn't come to the grenade launchers. The whole firing range would have been destroyed. And that's when someone shouted, "There are two moons." There really were two of them. One was ordinary pale yellow with spots of lunar craters and hovered where it was supposed to hover at this time of day. To the side of it, a little higher above the neighboring hill, hung or hovered another moon, pale, slightly larger, monotonous bluish without streaks, but with a well-defined outline. But if you look closely, it didn't look like a real dense material object, but rather like a spot, like a sunbeam, but without a light source. Silence fell on the training ground. Everyone was silently looking at the sky. Someone was talking quietly, discussing the situation. It turns out that many people have heard about this phenomenon, but few have already seen it with their own eyes, except for a few officers, including their company commander. It will start to increase now, and then it will split, the company commander said softly, and indeed, after some time, the disk of the second moon began to increase in diameter and moreover quite quickly. At the same time, its density weakened. Stars began to shine through it and it split slightly. It felt like a spotlight had been turned on somewhere and was rapidly moving away from them, and the spot of its light was growing as it moved away. But the source of this light should have been located in the Earth's orbit and moving into outer space. The circle enlarged until it occupied exactly half the sky, and the bifurcation disappeared. It was much brighter inside than outside. The boundary of the spread of light was quite sharp. It was enough to take a few steps forward, and you could read the newspaper. You step back, and it's night again. After about half an hour, maybe a little more, the effect began to melt literally before their eyes, like a fog. The shooting or firing was disrupted, and the soldiers were given the command to march to the location of the unit. They walked in silence towards the barracks and kept looking back. At the gate of the checkpoint, Mikhail looked back once again. It was already a complete dark night behind him. The lonely moon, after the outrage that they had just witnessed, so to say, seemed to illuminate only itself. The special counterintelligence operative, surprisingly, did not come this time and did not interview anyone. Probably the testimony of the inspector from the army headquarters was enough. The soldiers talked for a week, then everyone calmed down somehow. A week later, the night firings were repeated. Everything was calm, and they didn't let their seniors down. They would fire perfectly. So they never found out what it was, and they never saw it again. Local shepherds later said that this sometimes happens. Rarely, but it happens once every 5 to 6 years, and that it doesn't bode well. Either there will be a drought, or a pestilence will attack the flocks, or something worse. But nothing bad happened that year except for what went wrong. There was a soldier who fell from the wall during the exercises. By mistake, he fastened his carbine to the free rope instead of the main one. He was badly beaten, but thank God he remained alive. By the way, shortly before this story with the second moon, the company commander told Mikhail about another incident, no less intriguing. It was at the end of July, beginning of August, at the officer training camp somewhere on the Caucasian coast of the Caspian Sea, where he was sent along with their battalion commander and some other officers of the unit. They lived in a kind of sanatorium, resort-style living, with a view from the window directly to the sea. A strong explosion suddenly rang out at one of the morning formations. The sea in front of them had surged, and a bright fireball with a diameter of 30 meters flew out of the water at the distance of half a kilometer from the shore. At great speed and already absolutely silently, it went into the sky. There was no trajectory, it just went vertically up into space. From the explosion that preceded the appearance of the sphere, windows flew out in all coastal buildings, and there was noise in the narrator's ears. After a few minutes of complete confusion, head of those formations suddenly found what to say. And here it is. We have new weapons. But somehow he didn't say it confidently, nor convincingly, even for his own self. Well, finally, Mikhail wanted to tell about one more battalion story. There was a separate platoon in their unit which was almost constantly on guard duty on the road, somewhere in the mountains. They rarely appeared at the unit's location, and for a short time then left again, although they rarely visited the unit. They were called the mountain guard. According to them, they were somewhere deep in the mountains guarding a rock surrounded by several rows of barbed wire. No one knew what was in the rock, and no one wanted to know. If you know less, you sleep better. So one day during one of their visits, they opened up after Mikhail's comrade's stories about the flying cigar, and told them that they also had strange phenomena there. For example, sometimes small glowing balls or spheres the size of a tennis ball appeared near the protected object at night. At first, they thought they were fireballs, but they never caused any harm to anyone and never exploded. They just flew along the barbed wire. Sometimes they flew close to the people, and there was a feeling that it was looking at you. A warm light emanated from the balls, and they hummed softly with a slight crackle. However, they caused some kind of inexplicable anxiety, and the feeling was unpleasant. Another thing is rainbow spots, or, as they were also called, night spots. This phenomenon was also observed only at night and represented light glare on the ground, sunbeams, only at night and in the complete absence of light source. The glare, iridescent, glided freely across the ground. There was no threat from them, but on the contrary, the mood suddenly lifted. The only problem was that it was impossible to step on them. No matter how hard the guys tried, they always slipped away, or rather, they didn't even slip away, but simply closed and immediately opened somewhere nearby, a couple of meters away. The effect was like an eye blinking. After serving in the army, Mikhail once told all the stories to his cousin Nikolai, who, as it turned out, served there in Julfa, but a few years earlier, from 1979 to 1981, and not in Mikhail's unit, but directly at the border post. He listened attentively and did not laugh, but on the contrary added a little zest to the cake, so to say. One day he joined the state border guard squad. Everything was as usual. They walked with the squad along the control and tracking line. The barbed wire is intact, the strip is untouched, there are no signs of violation. Suddenly, right in front of their noses, a fireball flew out of the bushes. As it seemed to them 5 meters in diameter, the sphere soared into the sky and swiftly disappeared into the clouds. When they cautiously approached the bushes, and the bushes, by the way, were only 20 meters from the checkpoint, and examined the place from where it took off, they found nothing there, no traces of takeoff or landing. Later, in 1984, when Mikhail was already serving in the army, Nikolai, being in the Caspian Sea with the ichthyologists from Caspian Scientific Research Institute of Fisheries, observed a Y-shaped object flying over the sea. The UFO hovered silently over the surface of the sea and was bright blue in color. The entire team saw it. So that's what I wanted to let you know today. And please look at my other videos about the Caspian Sea mysteries and the Caucasus mysteries, ancient and modern, and UFOs, including UFOs, for example, over the Chechnya battlefields, or ancient Georgia and Armenia, and so much more. You will not find it anywhere else. I have dedicated decades of my life to collecting this information and disseminating it. And you can see my books out there with my co-author Phil Mantle, Paul Stonehill and Phil Mantle, like Russia's USO Secrets and others. We have quite a few in a number of languages now. And one of my books is used as a reference by the U.S. Navy Library on the UFO materials, serious materials. I think you will like my many videos that pertain to the history of Soviet UFOs, UFOs of the ancient Slavic lands there, also the Russian Empire and modern Russia. If you like my research and can support, please do so through the links you find in description to this video. Please kindly tell others about my work, my videos. And again, thank you for your attention to my work. Stay tuned for more.